Today in Harvard Square, we're visiting a site associated with Prince Hall. While little is known about Prince Hall's early life, his story is one of the earliest of African Americans overcoming huge obstacles to achieve success in their endeavors. Believed to have been born in Barbados, Prince Hall was brought to Massachusetts in the late 1740s and enslaved by William Hall. In 1770, sometime around the Boston Massacre, he was freed and started his own tannery by day. By night, he taught himself to read and write using books on philosophy. Within months of his freedom, he began to write petitions to the Massachusetts legislature to end the slave trade in the colony. When British troops occupied Boston in 1774, Prince Hall was in the process of attempting to join the Freemason lodges in Boston. Denied entry to all the colonial American lodges due to his race, he and 14 other black men enrolled in an Irish lodge, with troops stationed there. During this time, 6 men of color named Prince Hall were enlisted in the Continental Army and served in the militia on Cambridge Common. When the Battle of Bunker Hill broke out on June 17, 1775, it seems very likely that Prince Hall was there and fought for the American side. Many other men of color would fight and die on Breed's and Bunker's Hills, some of whom have been rediscovered and named today. 2 of those men, Neptune Frost and Cato Stedman, lie in Cambridge burying ground. After the battle, Prince Hall felt he could no longer remain a member of a British Masonic lodge, though the Americans continued to deny him entry into theirs. In 1777, he would form the African Lodge No. 1, seeking approval from the Grand Lodge in Great Britain. Upon George Washington's arrival in July of 1775, Prince Hall returned to his labor as a tanner. He was commissioned to make 2 leather drum heads for a unit of Massachusetts artillery in 1777. And he would write 5 petitions from the early 1770s onward, attempting to gain freedom and equality from the newly formed Massachusetts legislature on behalf of free and enslaved black Americans. After being ignored so many times by the Massachusetts colonial government, he hoped the new revolutionary spirit might inspire the Massachusetts legislature to examine their hypocrisy while fighting for their own liberty. Your honors need not to be informed that a life of slavery, like that of your petitioners, deprived of every social privilege, of everything requisite to render life even tolerable, is far worse than non-existence. In imitation of the laudable example of the good people of these states, your petitioners have long and patiently waited the event of petition after petition by them presented to the legislative body of this state, and cannot but with grief reflect that their success has been but too similar. They cannot but express their astonishment that it has never been considered that every principle from which America has acted in the course of her unhappy difficulties with Great Britain pleads stronger than 1,000 arguments in favor of your petitioners. They therefore humbly beseech your honors to give this petition its due weight and consideration, and cause an act of legislature to be passed whereby they may be restored to the enjoyment of that freedom which is the natural right of all men, and their children who were born in this land of liberty may not be held as slaves after they arrive at the age of 21 years. Amazingly, he seems to suggest the compromise that children may remain enslaved until the age of 21. Once again, he was ignored by the government body. At the conclusion of the war, the enslaved peoples of Massachusetts would be free. Not because of any action by the legislature, but because of 2 Supreme Judicial Court cases declaring that perpetual servitude of any man was illegal according to the new constitution of the state. Prince Hall continued to work doggedly on behalf of the newly freed black community. He petitioned for the desegregation of Massachusetts schools so that black children might have the same opportunities as white children. When this was similarly ignored in 1798, Prince Hall and his son Primus would found the first African American school in Boston in their basement on Snow Hill in the North End. When racist mobs attacked individuals in the free black neighborhoods, he gave his last recorded public speech, telling the victims of these attacks not to feel fear or shame. "'Tis not for want of courage in you, for they know that they dare not face you man for man, but in a mob, which we despise." Throughout the 19th century, Prince Hall was nearly lost to history. Luckily, the tradition of the Prince Hall Masonic lodges kept his name and memory alive, and after the Civil War, he began to receive attention once again. No known images of him exist today, save a few artistic renderings of what he may have looked like. When he died in 1807, he was buried in Copp's Hill Burying Ground in Boston's North End. His legacy was that of the nation's first African-American civil rights activist. Inspiring generations of civil rights to come, he would provide the first example of activism that would inspire Frederick Douglass, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Martin Luther King. Prince Hall opened the door for political protest and rebellion, leaving the next generations to continue to fight for equal rights. In 2010, after 5 years of research and planning, Cambridge would erect a memorial to this pioneer of human rights in the Cambridge Common, the same site where Prince Hall and fellow black soldiers camped to fight for the freedom and equality of Americans during the American Revolution.